To the podium, Mr. Jairek Robbins.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of JRCtv. If you're listening to the podcast or watching this video, hello. We have a very special guest joining us. I just finished listening to his book, which is awesome. If you're watching, it's called Never Split the Difference. You can see it right over his shoulders there, which is awesome. This is Mr. Chris Voss. He's the CEO and founder of the Black Swan LTD Group, or Black Swan Group is the better way to say it. He has 24 years experience in the FBI and was former FBI lead international kidnapping negotiator. He's a speaker, which I'll tell you where we first ran into each other, as well as an adjunct professor and consultant. I believe you were a professor at Harvard and also USC?
Well, I did. Harvard was several years ago, but these days it's USC, University of Southern California, for all you people in the Southeast. right. And Georgetown University in Washington, D.C.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing some of your wisdom and experience with everyone today in advance.
Hey, man, I'm flattered. I'm honored to be on with you. It's very cool. I'm glad we've crossed paths again.
Yeah, I'm excited. Speaking of which, the first time we crossed paths, I believe, was in Philly.
It was in Philly, yeah, an event that Carolyn Rim put on.
Yep, and we were both speaking there, and we had, I think it was like a 4-hour conversation that night, hanging out, talking with everybody.
That was a lot of fun.
I don't know, and I apologize, I don't know why it took me so long to read your book.
Well, it took me a while to get the book out, so that's okay.
Fair enough. And I finally got my hands on it. I went through the whole book, and I mean, I wish I could just like hit instant download and put this in everybody's playbook, except for the people we negotiate with, because obviously it's a little better for us to know it than them. But one thing you said that was really interesting is in the negotiation itself, and we'll get to some tactics, but I also want to share about you first. But in the negotiation itself, it's not you versus them as much as it's you both trying to solve the problem at hand. And I think a lot of people, including myself, when stuff gets tense, when stuff gets interesting, a lot of times that initial, adversary thought process comes out. So I want to talk about that. Maybe towards the end, we'll talk about how to make that adjustment for people. But for right now, I'd love to just tell a little bit about you. Like, how did you get into this for those listening and watching?
Yeah, just one thing after another out of left field, which I think everybody's life as it takes its path. Like I never planned on being an FBI agent. Probably didn't even think about it until about 10, 11 months before I was lucky enough to become an FBI agent. Wow. And then, I was a SWAT guy. Before I was with the FBI, I was a police officer at Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. Very good police department, wonderful, charming, wonderful city. And then, all right, so the FBI thing comes up. I head in that direction. I was on a SWAT team. To me, some of the best things that have happened to me in my life as a result of something that would be perceived as negative. So, I re-injured my knee. I tore ligaments in my knee because when I was in college, I fancied myself, sort of the Caucasian Bruce Lee. I wanted to be into martial arts, and I thought that would help me with the police department. Blew the knee out, blew it out again, trying out for the FBI's hostage rescue team, the FBI's version of the Navy SEALs. Wow. A bunch of the HRT guys are former SEALs, former Delta guys. Wow. And then I wanted completely destroyed my knee. I started to look at something else within crisis response. FBI had hostage negotiators, and I thought, how hard could that be?
Interesting mindset to come in with.
Yeah, I'm like, I could talk to terrorists. I mean, I really thought, I could do that. And initially they wouldn't let me in. A woman running the team in New York, Amy Bondaro, she was just like, she kind of looked down her nose at me, and because I didn't have any qualifications. Other than wanting to get after, which, anything in life is, ingenuity, initiative is one of the biggest things. And so she kind of tested me. I didn't realize it was a test at the time, but she gave me a task to go out and do. And
Was
which
that
was
the lady who had you join the crisis hotline?
yeah. Go volunteer at the hotline. And so then the process of doing that, I got on the team. Well, I had a kidnapping that didn't turn out the way we expected it to internationally. I talk about it in the book. And then figured we had to get better, and that's when I ended up collaborating with the guys at Harvard. And they were a lot of fun. I really enjoyed working with those guys. Bob Mnookin, Sheila Heen, Doug Stone. I mean, just a whole crew of really smart people up there. And they said, hey, you're doing the same stuff we are. You're just doing it with different stakes. And, that kind of opened the door to the business stuff. And, never split the difference. The book came out last May. And if I can add, my co-writer, Tal Raz, a friggin' genius. Like anybody out there, read anything Tal Raz has written if you're interested in reading something about business. He's also co-author of another book, Never Eat Alone, which is one of the best networking books ever written.
Keith Ferrazzi. He's been a guest on the show as well. People love him.
Keith is phenomenal. And Tal collaborated on Keith's book. So, yeah, I mean, read anything Tal's written. It's good stuff.
Very cool. I'll have to look him up in case we do business books. Very cool.
Yeah.
So you went through this journey, and there were different things you talked about in the book that, I mean, literally, I think your heart skips a beat every time you don't know. It's like your page turner. You're like, what happened? Did he get him? Did he not? Did they take him out? And I think it's always interesting and fun that, a lot of conversations start with 3 minutes, get me a car, the person dies. And you're like, whoa. And for most people, if you're watching, you're a business owner, a coach, or you're someone who a lot of times it's not life or death on the line as much as it's an opportunity to close some type of gap, though. And that continuously over time can lead up to the life or death of your company, if you think of it that way. Because really, truly, if you overpay or undercharge too many times in a row, you'll end up, your margin's gone. If your margin's gone and then you go into the red, now you're out of business. And I think the stats show that 98% of businesses fail within the first 10 years, 95% fail within the first 5 years. So this literally could be a life or death topic for a lot of small business owners if you're in that first 5 or 10 year period of your business. And so looking at it with that perspective, maybe I'd love to share just a couple tips. Obviously, they're going to want to grab the book to go deep in this concept, but I'd love to share a few tips for people watching of what some things that might be an easy applicable or easy something to apply almost immediately, that if they watch this, they took it away and they said, let me see if this really works. Like, I know he's saved people's lives. I know he's, rescued hostages, and some have gone, one or two have gone wrong, but most have gone in the right direction. And like you said, never split the difference and negotiate like your life depends on it, because in these cases, people's lives do depend on it. So if they were going to take something with that kind of urgency into a business negotiation later this afternoon, what's a couple tips you might give them of something they could try immediately just to see that it works before they have the chance to go through the book and really read all the meat in there?
Well, the first one is, first of all, the starting point is there's great power in deference. So you take a deferential approach, it then gives you license to say a lot of more things. And the book starts out with a story of, the first and best way to say no. And people either get this right away and start making money on it immediately, or it scares them. But the first and best way to say no in a deferential tone of voice is, how am I supposed to do that? And that has, I get examples for the other side immediately cutting their price by half from a woman who was negotiating with her 13-year-old son who wanted her to buy him a video game. And she said to her kid, how am I supposed to do that? And he immediately offered to pay for half. And then I got another colleague here in town, business person negotiating with a vendor over contract. And he said to the guy, how am I supposed to do that? And the vendor immediately cut his price by half.
Wow.
So, I mean, even that in and of itself, and some people are like, oh, I can't say that. What if they come back? You have to. Now I'm in trouble. And, my advice to them is, all right, so give it a try. Number one, we actually coach people to say, how am I supposed to do that continuously, at least 2 or 3 times until the other side finally does say, because you have to. Because actually your job as a business person is to be able to find out how much is on the table. And when the other side says, because you have to, you now have done your job on behalf of yourself, on behalf of your company. You push the other side to the limit, find out everything that's on the table, and you're still talking. When somebody says to you, because you have to, you're still engaged in the conversation. It's not over. They didn't slam their hands down and jump up and walk away. They didn't call you names. They didn't threaten to report you to the Better Business Bureau. They've said, hey, look, you pushed me to my limit. I'm still talking. I still want to make this deal. But, now we got to make the deal, which is your job as a business person to advocate for yourself. So it's, that little thing right there, that little one, more people have instantly made more deals just with that phrase.
And so here's an interesting question, because I've been playing with this myself. That would be on the point where someone's purchasing from you and they're trying to bid you down, correct?
Well, in any time that you have to say no.
Oh, got it.
Or that you need to buy yourself some time. It's actually a specifically designed thing. It's also triggers something we call forced empathy, and it's the best way to get the other side to take a look at you, to take a fair look at your position, and before they respond. So it's a stop and think moment for the other side. It triggers something that Danny Kahneman, a Nobel Prize-winning behavioral economist, refers to as slow thinking, which is deep thinking. Kahneman wrote a great book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And his stuff is a foundation, explains a lot of what makes hostage negotiation work in business and personal life, because Kahneman goes into great depth about how we react, in fact, in the real world, as opposed to theoretically, this intellectual mythology that just doesn't exist.
Right. The staircase thoughts that come afterwards. We're like, oh, I should have said this, or I should have said that, or I would have done this. And that's not reality of what actually happens.
Yeah, sometimes I wish I was as brilliant as I thought I was, right?
Yeah, when you're walking away 10 minutes later, you're like, oh, all the good thoughts rain in. But there's things like you're saying that have to happen in the moment. And here's my question. So anytime you have to say no, that would help. And this is something that it just got me thinking as I was reading through the book, because I was reading all these different pieces from ways you can adjust, yourself, ways you can better understand the person you're communicating with. There's so many golden nuggets and great tips filling these pages. So hope you don't mind me bragging a little bit about how awesome the book is. It really is.
No, go on.
Please, stop, go for it. And so it was interesting. And one thing that stood out in my head, and I'd love your insight. What if you're trying to nudge the person higher? So, and I was trying to figure out which technique might work in that case, where let's say someone tries to bid us down. So we say, oh, that product or that service, let's just use round numbers, is $10,000. And they say, well, the best I could do is $5,000. And would you start with that same phrase? So how am I supposed to do that?
Yeah, how am I supposed to do that? There's 3 or 4 different ways to approach that. Another thing you could say to somebody is, one of the skills we took from hostage negotiation, we use it. It's probably the most powerful one. Is this tool we call the label, and in hostage negotiation, it was called emotion labels. So the other thing I might want to say to someone is, it sounds like the value is just not there for you. Now that's actually a specifically designed phrase. And it's not what some people are taught to say, where they go like, well, what I'm hearing is, because if I say to you, it sounds like, or it seems like, or it looks like, the design of that is actually, it hits a portion of your brain that causes you to make an internal inquiry. Where the prefrontal cortex, the CEO of your brain, sort of checks with the rest of the brain. It says, it It causes you to contemplate this in a very specific way. Creates this interaction in the different components of your brain where you think about it. You actually react in a way that I know in advance you're going to react to. And then you'll come back with an answer that's much more than yes or no, because no negotiation, the proper answer is it's never yes or no. It's no and or yes and you need everything else that comes back with the and.
That's right.
Most people, thank you very much. Most people when they're saying the price is a problem, it's not really the money, it's what they're getting for the money. And they would give you all the money you needed if they were getting what they needed out of the deal. So if they express to you, because they don't know any better, the price is too high, and it's not the price, but it's the package, you're not going to solve their problem by cutting the price. You may actually make things worse. And you need to get, when you say it sounds like the value is just not there for you, that immediately turns the conversation over to value, and it makes them think, all right, so what is the value here for me? And it pivots now into something other than price, where you can find out how to fix the problem.
So all of a sudden they'll open dialogue, and ideally they'll start sharing with you and either go, oh, no, it's not that, which means
Right.
they do see the value and there's some other reason why they're saying this, and then you can
Right.
figure out what the real reason is. Or they might go, you're right. And I'm guessing a follow-up might be, well, what's missing?
Yeah.
What value needs to be there for it to be that justified price or what we charge? And at that point, either one way, you're going to learn why they're really saying no to that, or two, you're going to learn what else you need to add to it to get it to that price where they easily go, yeah, it's totally worth it. Let's do it.
Right, exactly. And, the entrepreneur's, the business person's dilemma, the salesperson's dilemma, is everybody's first move is to cut the price. And everybody also knows that it's probably not price that's the problem. The hard part is, how do you pivot away from price and get right into what exactly is the problem? And so one of the ways is, the first way is, of course, say, how am I supposed to do that? Which is just really a really nice way to straight reject what they've just said and make them rethink it. But the flip side, it sounds like the value is just not there to you, then immediately takes you into the areas that are probably going to solve the problem. Actually, much more quickly also. These are what we like to say, these are delays that save time. These are great time savers. This is a hack forward into the negotiation.
Got it. So how am I supposed to do that? And then it sounds like the value just isn't there for you.
Right.
And what's interesting twice that you've done that I've been noticing for people, because I just read the book, I know what to look for, at least some of the things, is you did two things that I think were important that you pointed out in the book. One, slow down. So often, I know this myself, our heart rate gets going, we get excited, we get nervous palms, we start seeing the finish line, and so we start talking really fast and getting excited. Oh yeah, totally, we can do that for you. And that, according to the book, that's not helping.
No, it's first thing is, because we're under such time pressure, we think that we got to speed up in order to solve it. And the exact opposite is true. I had a judge in a federal trial in New York that had this great phrase: "We're going to delay things in order to save time." So you actually get through the negotiation process faster because you get off the gerbil wheel. People go faster, but they're on a gerbil wheel of repetitive conversations. And they don't understand that if they were to slow down, they'd have fewer conversations and in its entirety save a lot of time. So slowing down actually does accelerate the process. You make fewer mistakes. You don't renegotiate. You don't have as many misunderstandings. And, the misunderstandings of false agreement are were really the gerbil wheel of business. That's what eats up our time. So it's understanding actually how to move much more quickly by taking a more deliberate approach and having fewer conversations.
Very nice. And then the other thing is watching the physiology and tonality of what's going on. And I know one thing you said, which is interesting, a lot of business today is done over the phone with each other or via email, which email is probably the fastest way to be misunderstood because they're reading in their own voice, hearing their own inflection of what they think you're saying versus actually hearing you. And you pointed out the value of actually being able to see the person and be next to the person. It's something, I think I've talked about from time to time with everyone who's watching and listening, which is the concept of being able to see that the congruence or incongruency within the other person and how valuable that can be to the actual process of negotiation and communicating.
Right. And the incongruence, there are numbers that are thrown out. People talk, a popular ratio is 7:38:55. That's 7% of your communication is words. And, people get caught up in whether or not those numbers are accurate. And the issue is the word that you used exactly a moment ago. It doesn't matter what the ratio is. It matters when things are incongruent, when the tone of voice doesn't line up with the words. I don't care if it's 80-20. I don't care if it's 50-50. If my words and my tone don't line up, we have an issue here. And you're actually communicating an issue to me. I have a colleague, extremely successful guy, got fired over a lack of understanding of incongruence. He's talking to a billionaire investor in a company. And the billionaire investor's got a bad idea. And in discussing it on the phone, my friend, my colleague says, okay. Now he's communicating real hesitancy with so his tone and his words aren't exactly lining up. The billionaire investor hears the word okay, construes that as agreement, and later accuses him of lying. Oof. So I don't care what the ratios are. Somebody's, we're desperate to hear yes. Everybody is. It's an addiction. And so we want to hear it so bad, somebody says, okay. And it's very easy for the other side to go, he said yes, woohoo. When, there's an incongruence there. And okay means, look, I got some real problems with this. So it's, how do you hear it and how do you dig into it so that you don't end up in a train wreck or somebody losing their job or a deal going bad?
And speaking of which, the interesting process, I remember, I forget which chapter it was, but you're talking about sometimes missing those clues and how important and valuable they can be. And in one of the chapters you mentioned, there were certain clues, there were hidden clues. And I think this alludes to the name of your group and company because they're referred to, I believe, as the Black Swans of the conversation, where
right.
There's certain cues that are visible or you can see, like, okay, should have picked up on that one. But then there's hidden things in every negotiation, little facts and details and information and things that if you did uncover, changes the whole picture. And if I remember right, this was one of the stories, if you wouldn't mind sharing, the gentleman who the Black Swans were something he had said that no one parlayed or no one had shared, which landed up him stating that there was a certain time when he believed he was going to leave this earth, and no one heard that until afterwards. And then it was like, holy smokes, if we would have known that, we knew he was already wanting to die. Like, ugh. And that was the Black Swan in that moment. It was kind of hidden in the conversation or hidden from everyone knowing. And so the value of purposely taking time to dig for the unknown and do what you said is expect the fact that there's unknown factors always.
Yeah, and they're going to be gold mines. These nuggets are no small things. I mean, they're the pieces of information that if you got the other side to tell you would change everything. And they're always there because, and it's kind of a two-step mind warp thing here, but we're always hiding stuff in negotiations. I mean, there's always stuff that we're not revealing the other side. So what does that tell us? What that tells us, first of all, is stuff we're not revealing is important. Otherwise, we'd reveal it. If we feel that they could gain all sorts of leverage on us and we'd be vulnerable, then it also means if we could trust them with it, we could make a better deal. So by definition, if we've got those, the other side's got them. Now, the hard part to wrap your mind around is in the immortal words of Donald Rumsfeld, unknown unknowns. What happens when the hidden cards on both sides begin to overlap? It's, I like to imagine as if you're playing Texas Hold'em, what would happen if instead of taking the cards on the table that everybody gets to use, you got to see the other guy's cards and together you can make up your best hand. That's what you're trying for here. But we're scared to reveal this stuff. And it's another reason why being able to tell when somebody's lying is not good enough. Because people only lie about the stuff they think's important. And half of their black swans, they don't even know it's important. And I was here in town, living in Los Angeles, and I get a chance maybe to talk to the Hollywood types. So I'm coaching a woman filmmaker recently. She got an investor that wants to buy into this film and invest in it so this person can not just be in the film, but can play both primary roles. I mean, I think this person probably saw, The Social Network, the movie about Facebook, and there was an actor that played the Winklevoss twins. One guy played both parts. So this investor wants that. And the filmmaker's telling me, like, that's going to double our budget. I mean, even if I wanted to do that, the CGI, the cameras, everything else, it's going to be crazy. I can't do it. And I said, well, all right, so go back into the conversation and just open up the conversation and talk. In the middle of the conversation, the investor says, oh, and I got this castle in France we could film in. Like, whoa, what? Wait. Whoa. There's a black swan. Mm-hmm. But nobody knows if it's there. Or, you think based on the initial conversation, this person's ego-driven and they're going to destroy my budget and what they want. Well, maybe they're scared to let you know that they've got something to bring to the table that's going to change everything. Mm-hmm. Maybe they think you're going to take advantage of them if they know that. So diving in, you find people always find crazy things by getting into the conversations.
I'll give you a specific example that happened to me that really, truly, I think represents this, and it's something I wasn't thinking of, which it happened both ways, where we had a group reach out, and it was interesting because the fee they offered to hire us to speak was really small, significantly smaller than what we would normally accept or ask for. And I think they knew what our numbers were, and they just completely underbid it. And I was like, wow. But it also sparked my curiosity of why in the world would they offer that? Like, that's really small. And I was scratching my head. And so I called them and I said, okay, well, what's going on? And what are you looking for? And they're like, we want to fly to New York. We want you to, just do a initial recording of your training, and you're going to record it here at our studio. We'll edit it. We'll put it together. And then we're going to do a digital broadcast out to probably 500 companies. And then as long as it's liked, we'll do it out to another 10,000 companies. And that will, part of the training. And we'll offer a couple $1,000s for it. I was like, wow, like we charge significantly higher than that. And to do training for that many companies, like we're losing a lot of revenue by giving it away to all these companies. And that was my initial thought.
Right.
And I went to my dad and I talked to him about it because he's been in this business for years. And I was talking back and forth. And I said, what do you think?
What does he know? How does that, what does
that guy know?
He's an old guy.
I passed it by him and I said, what do you think? And he said, well, wait a minute. You never asked an important question. And I said, what? And he said, what companies are these going to? I was like, I don't know. So I went back and asked. And they said L'Oreal, Goldman Sachs, PricewaterhouseCoopers, the biggest companies on earth. And he said, well, how long did it take them to build that relationship? I said, well, they've been doing training for these companies for over 40 years. He said, so how long would it take you to try to build that kind of relationship with these companies that they're willing to put you directly inside of these companies with your best stuff on showcase? How long would it take you to get in the door of all those places? And he said, how many if it goes well? I said, 10,000. He's like, buddy, I don't think you could pay for that kind of advertisement. I started laughing. And so the Black Swan was something where I just didn't even ask in that case who it was going to, because that was invaluable. Of like, right. Wow, I didn't realize that, because it didn't seem important to me at the time. I thought I was losing revenue because they were giving away our training to all these companies. And in reverse, it was actually helping us open a relationship with lots of companies that we had zero contacts with before that. And so this thought process of being willing to dig around, even in the information sometimes that's handed to you, because they handed that to me and I just didn't know what to do with it because I wasn't, very seasoned at the time in that field. And I went, oh, this is what to ask about that, or this is how to do it. And I think sometimes in looking for that black swan, like you said, something in the book where you always negotiate in teams, which is having someone else to give you another perspective on what's going on in case you can't see it yourself, which in that case, I couldn't see what was going on because I didn't know what to look for. But luckily, I had someone who was a little bit more seasoned on the team who knew what to look for. And all of a sudden, bingo, there was the gold that we didn't realize was sitting there the whole time.
Right. And here's what else I really liked about you telling me on this story, because you didn't take yourself hostage in any way along the way. I mean, you're curious, you're willing to find out. I mean, of course, your initial reaction is like, oh, God, that's too low. I'm not even going to talk to these people, or if I talk to them, I'm vulnerable. I mean, you're still digging in. And one of the things that we teach on a regular basis is, don't take yourself hostage by not being willing to continue to talk. Or, if they can't make you say yes, then you shouldn't be afraid to talk to anybody, regardless of what your perception is about the process. And so, you didn't take yourself hostage anywhere along the line there as you proceeded, which I think is really cool about the way that you handled that.
Well, thank you. I think there's something else I learned in the book that was really important too, which was the example you said when you were teaching a class and you said, okay, you give student A $10 and you tell them to make a deal with student B. And you say, go, and you both have to agree on it, and you have to get the most you can out of this deal. And you let them negotiate it with each other. And you were saying, the different options of what happens there. And so often, I think up here in our head, we start fighting for fair versus the reality.
The F word.
Yeah, the F word. And that becomes a dangerous word because that's an emotional pull and reaction into a situation. And we lose our logical ability to understand what's actually unfolding. Because I think if I remember right, you have people come back and they say, well, 5 and 5 or 6 and 4. And then people get pissed because it's not fair. And they say, no, right. I'm not accepting 4 when you get 6. No, I'm not accepting 5, even though it's split, but I want more than that. And you get these emotional reactions. And I think one thing that's interesting that you pointed out is the deal everyone should really make is $9 and $1. Because in reality, that's the best deal the person with $10 could get, unless he keeps it all or she keeps it all. But then that fairness, that F word that sneaks in there and gets people. Would you mind sharing a bit about that?
Yeah, it's once we started looking for it, and I say we because I've got a team that I work with, and I've got people that I've worked with that have really contributed to the ideas. Yeah, my son Brandon. Is probably an uncredited co-author of the book. He's been so involved in helping develop the book since I left the FBI.
Wow.
All right. So when we said fair, man, try and pick a negotiation that the word fair doesn't come up. Probably impossible to have a conversation. And it's used both by the very manipulative types because they know how effective it is. And it's also used when people are just getting defensive, but and that's why we call it the F-bomb, man, because you throw the word fair out there, like, I just want what's fair. And you've immediately accused the other person of being unfair. And it'll move them when they shouldn't move, or it'll make them question themselves when they probably shouldn't question themselves, or they'll walk away from a deal that would have otherwise made them better off because they didn't think it was fair. And plenty of people I'm not getting what I'm worth here. When take away the other side's compensation, and they would have thought it was a great deal. We tried to get into. I was trying to get into. I did some training for the United Arab Emirates several years ago. Trained their national hostage negotiation team. And then the training was over, and the relationship with the general contractor that brought us in fell apart. We're trying to get back in. And there's theoretically $8 million contract on potentially in the offing. I'm talking to a guy. I'm trying to get an introduction. He says, what's my finder's fee? If I make this introduction, you make this deal. And I said, well, finder's fee, 10% is fair. And I hadn't really thought about it, but he said, $800,000 would change my family's life. And I thought to myself in that moment, he's going to make an introduction. Maybe we'll go to dinner. If it works out, he gets $800,000 for that dinner. That's not fair. And we initially turned down that deal. And afterwards I was thinking the leftover here is a lot of money. What do I care how much he gets as long as I get my end? And I almost walked away from trying to make that deal. We went back and I said, look, you got it. You get us this deal, you got it. It ends up not working out, but I'd taken myself hostage over this fairness thing, and it's everywhere. I mean, I can change compensation on any deal if I know that it's fair or unfair. It's going to change everybody's perspective. It's almost insidious how often it comes up and how much it makes people change their minds.
It's wild. I had it happen to me where I did a year contract training with a company, and then a few years later, I found out someone else who was also on the training team got paid a radically different amount. And all of a sudden, a year contract that seemed like one of my favorite things I did that year turned into something I was pissed about because I found out that it was unfair how we were compensated. And
it's nuts.
It's wild how that emotion messes with you. So here's a big question. How do people go about staying out of, the F-bomb, the fairness thought process around this?
Well, that's one of the hardest things to do. And a little bit of it is just thinking it through in advance and inoculating yourself. And then also understanding how sometimes people can mess around with you. It wasn't fair, your share, that wasn't fair that they got. The classic question I like to ask people is, if you worked harder to expand the size of the pie, would you take a smaller portion? And most people are like, no, I'm going to expand a pie and I'm going to get less as a result. I mean, and the great example of that I like to use all the time is the last NFL players lockout. A lot of criticism of the players after the fact is they put all this money in the owner's pocket and they got a smaller percentage of the pie. That wasn't fair. Well, they're all doing pretty darn good as a result.
They're all making $100 million contract in a bad small slice of the pie.
Yeah, they are making much more money. And my book is another example. I pulled a team together to bring together the book. My co-writer, Tal Raz, the other people that I collaborated with, I got a phenomenal agent, Steve Ross, did a great job. And I ended up with a smaller portion of the total pie from the book proceeds. But my smaller portion is significantly larger than a lot of other authors' 100% of the pie. So I expanded the pie enough so that my percentage is more take-home dollars for me. Nice. And it's a much better product as well. So it's a hard thing to do, but it's about not taking yourself hostage.
Smart. And I think what you just said there is brilliant, especially for small business owners. The concept of, if you can expand it enough, if you can strengthen the quality of your product or service, if you can strengthen the reach, the amount of people you're going to get to, if you can add something by splitting it with someone who's going to add so much value to what you're doing that everything expands, even your piece is still worth more as a whole than if you would have kept the whole thing yourself and not expanded or not bettered the product or not bettered the service. I think that's really important for people, especially towards the beginning, because we have this weird mindset of oh my gosh, if I split half, I'm left with barely anything. Instead of thinking, if I split half and we make it this much better, that's better than I would have done on my own. That little distinction is really important for just the beginnings. I mean, all entrepreneurs, but especially those beginning stages.
Yeah, and a lot of reasons that we get concerned about giving up those pieces. We're scared of control. there's another issue of speed. How fast do we get things done when suddenly we're working by committee? And there's a phrase I heard not too long ago, like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go as a group. You go fast, but you don't go far. And you go far with a team.
I like that.
And so, this teamwork seems inefficient in the short term. In the long term, you get wealthy as a team, right?
I like that. So a couple questions. Thank you for spending all this time with us. And a couple questions. If people want to go grab a copy of this book, where do they go? Where's the best place? Is it Amazon or your guys' site?
Amazon gives the best prices. I gotta admit, I buy a lot of stuff on Amazon, and I even get my best price if I buy copies of the book when I buy it from Amazon.
Same here. So go to Amazon, look up Chris Voss, Voss.
Like
or
the water?
Look up Never Split the Difference. And if you're watching the video, it's that yellow and red book sitting right behind him in two different languages up there.
Yeah.
If you're listening, it's a yellow on top, red on bottom book, just so you know you got the right one. And then also for people who own a company or people who might be making a major negotiation in their life or business, how do they get a hold of you and your group and team to maybe help them out if they want to hire you guys for a service or bring you in for a training for their team? Where would they go for that?
All right, well, the simplest way is, we've got a weekly negotiation newsletter.
Nice.
And for people that are in the United States, if you send a text to the number 22828, and the text is "That's Right," THATSRAGHT, no apostrophe, no spaces, as if it was all one word. And that'll give you the opportunity to sign up for the newsletter, quick and easy. Comes out once a week. We've got a lot of training resources. Newsletter's free. That keeps you up on our different training events. We're going to be in Los Angeles just in a couple of days, a one-day training event.
Yes.
That keeps you up on a lot of information about us. That's the simplest, quickest way is send that, again, "That's Right," no punctuation, no spaces, to 22828. If you're not in the U.S., the website is blackswanltd.com, BLACKSWAN LTD.com. And you get a lot of the same resources there.
Very cool. So either send that text or go to blackswanltd.com. If you're listening to this, look in the show notes. If you're on our blog, look below this video. If you're on Facebook or YouTube or anywhere else, look below or next to the video. You'll see the link to take you right on over there. And also the information about texting. And thank you. I guess last question I'd leave is, I'm always curious, just on a personal note, what's the message that you most want to leave with everyone who's going to watch this, everyone who's going to listen, everyone who's going to tune in? What's that core message that you really want to ripple out that you hope they really get after watching all this and connecting with you here?
Great negotiation is about great long-term relationships. It's not about I win, you lose. If you're an I win, you lose guy, that's lose long-term strategy. We don't beat other people in our deals. We beat the adversary's the situation. We beat the problem. We beat the situation. But you negotiate with me. I'm not negotiating at your expense. I want to make a great deal with you. And I wish everybody had that attitude. We win together. We win by collaborating. And it's not something where you got to hurt the other guy. You got to beat him. So great negotiation is great collaboration, and it gives you a better life.
I like that. Well, again, sir, thank you for joining us here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and checking out another episode. We'll see you next week for another episode of JRCtv. Remember, if you want to grab a copy of Chris's book, you're going to go to Amazon, look up Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Also, you can visit blackswanltd.com for more information on bringing them out to your business to do some training on negotiation, some training or just more information of learning from their newsletter. Make sure to visit there and check that out. And Chris, thank you one more time for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm really, really honored to be on your show.